are going to be covering Canto 3, Chapter 28, which is entitled Kaple's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service, verses 41 to 44. Before we start the verses, so just a quick, I guess, a summary of a couple of verses, or this chapter actually, because I think it's a beautiful chapter where we hear about the process of Ashtanga Yoga, actually, the eightfold process of performing meditation, performing like pranayama, and so many different aspects of the eight-limbed yoga practice. And through this chapter, we see that it's progressively described in terms of, one step after another. It's very similar to chapters, sorry, very similar to chapter 6 in the Bhagavad Gita. But here, what we see is that we go into a lot more depth of in the meditation. So we start off describing the different practices of Ashtanga Yoga, the way to sit, how to execute pranayama, and how to meditate on the Supersoul in the heart. And then we go through a very nice section in the middle of the chapter where the beautiful form of the Lord is described and how one should progressively meditate on different limbs of the Lord, beginning from the lotus feet, climbing up to the navel, to the chest, and like this to the face, and the beautiful smiling face of Krishna. And through that process, through that practice of progressively going deeper in one's meditation, we see that somebody who's deep, somebody who's sincere and who has been practicing and has been absorbed for a prolonged period of time, such a yogi actually becomes fixed in their concentration on the Supreme Lord. And by sustained practice, perfection is ultimately attained. And what we'll learn about is how that perfection is ultimately realized by one's recognition of one's true identity, which is beyond the bodily designations that we've got. And in these few verses that we've got, 4 verses that we've got from 41 to 44, which are the last few verses of the chapter, what we see is we get a description of how the Supreme Lord or the Paramatma is different to the Atma, how the Paramatma is actually beyond the material nature as well as the Jiva soul. Then we also learn about how that focused meditation on the Paramatma can then lead one to seeing the Paramatma everywhere, in all living entities and all atoms. And we also get a description, very interestingly placed, about how the spirit soul is just like a spark of fire, and compared to the bigger fire of the Supreme Lord. And in that way, we take on different bodies just as different shapes of wood, which are under the influence of the 3 modes. And the last verse, what we find and what we see is that one who is able to stand strong, one who is able to overcome the pullings of the 3 modes of nature, such a person can actually be situated in self-realization. And so if I just start sharing my screen, and so I'll read the Sanskrit, but if somebody would like to then read the translation in purple, that'll be much appreciated. Bhutin, so this is verse 41. Bhutendriyantakaranaat pradhanat jiva samnitat atma tatha pritag drashta bhagavan brahma samnita. And we'd like to read the translation in purple?
Yeah, can I do Prabhuji, please?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Translation by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Param Brahma, is the seer. He is different from the Jiva, soul, or individual living entity, who is combined with the senses, the 5 elements, and consciousness. Purport. A clear conception of the complete whole is given herewith. The living entity is different from the material elements and the supreme living entity, the personality of Godhead, who is the creator of the material elements, is also different from the individual living entity. This philosophy is propounded by Lord Chaitanya as Achintya Bhedya Bhed Tattva. Everything is simultaneously one with and different from everything else. The cosmic manifestation created by the Supreme Lord by his material energy is also simultaneously different and non-different from him. The material energy is non different from the Supreme Lord, but at the same time, because that energy is acting in a different way, it is different from Him. Similarly, the individual living entity is one with and different from the Supreme Lord. This simultaneously one and different philosophy is the perfect conclusion of the Bhagavata school as confirmed here by Kapila Dev. Living entities are compared to the sparks of a fire. As stated in the previous verse, fire, flame, smoke, and firewood are combined together. Here, the living entity, the material elements, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are combined together. The exact position of the living entities is just like that of the sparks of a fire. They are part and parcel. The material energy is compared to the smoke. The fire is also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. In the Vishnu Puran, it is said that whatever we can see or experience, either in the material or spiritual world, is an expansion of the different energies of the Supreme Lord. As fire distributes its light and heat from one place, the Supreme Personality of Godhead distributes his different energies all over his creation. The four principles of the Vaishnava philosophic doctrine are Shuddha Advaita, purified oneness, Dvaita Advaita, simultaneously oneness and difference, Vishvish, Vishishta Advaita, and Dvaita. All four principles of Vaishnava philosophy are based on the thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam explained in these two verses. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to get a verse up. So let me just go back. So it's really interesting here, if we look at the beginning about how Srila Prabhupada in his purport is very much talking about living entity is different from the material elements, and the supreme living entity, the personality of Godhead, who is the creator of the material elements, is also different from the individual living entities. We see this very much in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 in these few verses here from 4 to 6. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these eight constitute my separated material energies. Besides these, O mighty Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature, i.e., the jiva. Text 6, all created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. So it's really nice here because we see that the Bhagavatam is very reflective of the Bhagavad Gita. We understand that the Bhagavad Gita is a foundational study of our Vaishnava theology, and the Srimad Bhagavatam just takes it up to the next level. And so very much in this purport, in this verse, what we see is that there's a difference between the jiva, the Supersoul, or the Paramatma or Bhagavan, and the material nature. We understand that material nature and the living entity are both described as prakriti. Prakriti because they're subordinate, they are energies of the Supreme Lord. But a very nice example can be given in terms of the relation of the three. We can have an example of a business and a businessman and the employees in a company. If we look at a business has assets, it has resources, which is very much like material nature. But then the business has a single business owner, right? And that is the Supreme Lord, that is Krishna. And Krishna controls, he's the proprietor, he's the controller of the business. Sometimes he'll dip his hand in, sometimes he won't, right? Like we know businessmen, businesswomen, whoever's owning a business, a corporate company, sometimes they might get involved in the day-to-day things, sometimes they'll just be aloof and out, somewhere else playing golf or something like that. But then you have the employees of the business who are very much like the jiva, the living entities. The employees of the business are the ones who actually get heavily involved with the assets and the resources of the company. right? Many of us who are working, we have experience of this. We have maybe laptops from work. We have different items that we can use for work. If we're not sitting at a desk or working on laptops, we'll have different equipment that we'll be using. And what's the best use of those equipment, right? Some of us may misappropriate these resources. We may use them for our own benefit, for different purposes. But we see that in reality, these resources are given to us in order to use them for the company, to serve the company itself. In the same way, the jiva has access to prakriti, to the material energy, to material nature, and the best use of material nature is to use it to serve the owner of material nature, who is Krishna. But actually, the relationship of the Supreme Lord with the material nature and even with us is much more intimate than just like a businessman who can sometimes be aloof from the business. In verse 7 of that chapter here, we see text 7. Mata parataram nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre mani ganaiva. Translation: O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. The relationship between the Supreme Lord and material nature and even the living entity actually is much more intimate than just a business owner with his employees or with the business. Because the Supreme Lord is there, present behind every single activity, every single thought, every single movement of material nature and of the jiva, just as pearls are strung on a thread. When we think of a necklace of pearls, or many of us will be wearing gantimala, right, a tulsi beads around our necks. Can we see the thread behind it? If it's crafted nicely, if the tulsi beads haven't broken, then chances are we can't see the thread. But yet, all the tulsi beads, all the pearls are kept intact around in the necklace because of the invisible thread that binds them together. In the same way, the trajectory of our life, the way Prakriti, the way material nature is moving, the way our lives are moving, are carefully orchestrated by the Supreme Lord. And his hand is there right behind it, expertly directing us to come closer to him. In the very last section, I go down here, we see that Srila Prabhupada gives a very interesting nugget here. And I'm not going to make this a heavily philosophical session on the four philosophies that are described here. But after these verses Srila Prabhupada goes through these verses, we see that at the very beginning, he talks about the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva by Lord Chaitanya. And then at the very end, he talks about how actually the four principles of Vaishnava philosophy are based on the thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam explained in these two verses, this one and the previous one. So it's really interesting because when we go through the evolution of theology or theism, when we really understand the progression of how Vaishnavism has evolved over the generations and over the years, we see that Vaishnavism has gone through interesting focus points in its theology and philosophy. At some point, there was Shuddha Advaita, which is purified oneness. At some point, there was Dvaita Advaita, which is simultaneous oneness and difference. At some point, there was Vishishta Advaita, which, if I just recall correctly, yeah, that's qualified non-dualism. And then we've got the Dvaita philosophy, which is dualism. And we see, without going through into all of these, we see that what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did was expert. It was just waiting to happen, whereby he's brought in all of these doctrines, right? All these four different Vaishnava philosophies and combined them all into a ultimate doctrine, which is Ajantya Bheda Bheda Tattva, which is not just simultaneous oneness and difference, but it's the inconceivableness of it because there's also Shuddha Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, and Dvaita all mixed in together. Okay, next verse. Sarvabhuteshu chatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshetananya bhavena bhuteshviva tadatmatam. And we'd like to read the translation?
Can I read, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Translation. A yogi should see the same soul in all manifestations, for all that exists is a manifestation of different energies of the Supreme. In this way, the devotee should see all living entities without distinction. That is the realization of the Supreme Soul. Purport. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, not only does the Supreme Soul enters each and every universe, but he enters even the atoms. The Supreme Soul is present everywhere in the dormant stage, and one can see the presence of the. Could you scroll up, please? Of the Supreme Soul everywhere, one is liberated from material designations. The word Sarva Bhuteshu is to be understood as follows. There are four different divisions of species: living entities which sprout from the earth, living entities born of fermentation or germination, living entities which come from eggs, and living entities which come from the embryo. These four divisions of living entities are expanded in the 8,400,000 species of life. A person who is freed from material designations can see the same quality of spirit present everywhere or in every manifested living entity. Less intelligent men think that plants and grass grow out of the earth automatically, but one who is actually intelligent and has realized the self can see that this growth is not automatic. The cause is the soul, and the forms come out in the material bodies under different conditions. By fermentation in the laboratory, many germs are born, but this is due to the presence of the soul. The material scientists think that eggs are lifeless, but that is not a fact. From Vedic scripture, we can understand that living entities are in different forms are generated under different conditions. Birds evolve from eggs, and beasts and human beings are born from the embryo. The perfect vision of the yogi or devotee is that he sees the presence of the living entity everywhere. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much. So here at the beginning, Srila Prabhupada talks about the Brahma Samhita, which, oops, I go to, oops, 535. So if I just go back actually, okay, here. So we talk about how not only does the Supreme Soul enter each and every universe, but he enters even the atoms. Oftentimes we hear about how the Super Soul is present inside each and every living entity, inside the heart of each living entity. But here in this verse of Brahma Samhita, we find that actually the Supreme Lord is not just present inside each and every living entity, but in each and every atom. He's an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. It's very nice because what we see is that, like I was mentioning earlier, the process of Ashtanga yoga is to meditate on the super soul in the heart. And what we see in this verse is that as one meditates on the super soul in the heart and one really perfects their practice of yoga, then at one point one's absorption becomes so much so that one can see the Supreme Soul everywhere, in all living beings, in all living things, and even the or the unmoving things, or the, in quotes, dead matter. We see how in Canto 10 in the Vraj Leela pastimes, how after Krishna left Vrindavan, all the Vrajvasis were devastated. They couldn't live without Krishna. But somehow or another, they were continued living because Krishna had promised and given them hope that he will be back. And so they were almost like the living dead, living, hoping and praying and wishing that Krishna would come back, but dead because their life was no longer there with them, because their life had left Vrindavan. And as we read the pastimes, especially when it comes to like Uddhava coming back to Vrindavan, we see how all the Vrajvasis were so absorbed in Krishna, in their absorption and their love for Krishna, that the Gopas, for them, it was like Krishna never left because they were so absorbed in seeing Krishna, in playing with Krishna, in going about their daily activities as if Krishna was right there with them. We see how and hear how the gopis were lamenting that debauch, Krishna, right, who basically had captivated their hearts, had given so many loving exchanges with them, has now left all these gopis and gone to Mathura, and then from there to Dwarka in the end, and enjoying the same pastimes, enjoying the same loving exchanges with the queens of Dwarka and the ladies of Mathura, that they were lamenting that we're trying to forget Krishna, but we can't. And yet at the same time, we hear about the sweetness in that also, because I can't remember who it is, but one of the acharyas described that Radharani is just, in one sense, ecstatic because she's thinking that, oh, I miss Krishna so much. I wish he were here. But then at the same time, she's glad that he's not there because when he is present in front of her, she sees only one Krishna. When Krishna is not present, then she sees Krishna everywhere. And so in that way, we see that there's such a parallel between this Ashtanga yoga process of meditating on, the process of sitting, the process of pranayama, and all these different yogic activities, and attaining perfection through the practice and process of bhakti yoga. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, we know there's that famous verse where we see that a yogi sees with equal vision everyone and everything. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Kavihastini Shunicheva Shvapake Cha Pandita Sarva Samadarshina. We heard the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. We see that the vision of somebody who is advanced in the yogic practice, they're able to see Krishna or the Supersoul present in everyone and everything. And that's what we aspire. That's the aspiration we have, to be able to just see the Supreme Lord everywhere we go. And then when we look at the last paragraph here, we talk about the different living entities and so on and so forth. And Sri Prabhupada is very much talking about, bringing out this point of how there's a difference in the less intelligent scientists compared to the more advanced scientists. The less intelligent scientists believe that we can create life from matter. But the reality is that life comes from life. And there's a very nice book, I believe it's a compilation of Srila Prabhupada's maybe purports and lectures and things like that, called Life Comes from Life. And in there, what is debunked basically is how life cannot come or cannot manifest just from dull matter, because life comes from the presence and from the source of the soul. And in that book, it systematically goes through argument after argument in different contexts as well, to build this conclusion that life comes from life. It challenges this idea, this concept that chemicals and physical processes alone can create life. Like sometimes we see people trying in laboratories, just creating these things. But in some way, shape, or form, they have to inject some sort of consciousness, some sort of living entity into that whole mixture in order to bring out life. And so if the living force by nature, we understand that the mere presence of the soul is what gives life. If somebody is lying dead in front of us, we see that family, friends, that will come, oh, he's dead, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone. But where is he gone? The body is right there. What is gone is the living entity, it's the soul. And so in that same way, we understand that the soul is what gives life. And without the presence of the soul, additional life cannot come. And so ultimately what that book really brings us to is that ultimately life comes from a supreme living being, i.e. Krishna. And through that supreme consciousness comes the minute consciousness, which is the fundamental aspect of the living force. And then matter or the body that we have and that we are contained within becomes secondary. Okay, next verse. Verse 43. Svayonishu yatha jyotir ekam nana pratiyate yoninam gunaveshyamyat tathatma prakrito stitha. And we'd like to read translation and purport.
Can I read it, Prabhu?
Yes.
As fire is exhibited in different forms of wood, so under different conditions of the modes of material nature, the pure spirit soul manifests itself in different bodies. Can I read the purport, please?
Yes, Mataji.
It is to be understood that the body is designated Prakriti is the interaction by the three modes of material nature. And according to these modes, someone has a small body and someone has a very large body. For example, the fire in a big piece of wood appears very big, and in a stick, the fire appears small. Actually, the quality of fire is the same everywhere, but the manifestation of material nature is such that according to the fuel, the fire appears bigger and smaller. Similarly, the soul in the universal body, although of the same quality, is different from the soul in the smaller body. The small particles of soul are just like parts, parts of the large soul. The greatest soul is the supersoul, but the supersoul is quantitatively different from the small soul. The supersoul is described in the Vedic literature as the supplier of the necessities of the smaller soul. Nitya Nityanam, one who understood this distinction between the supersoul and the individual soul is above um, lament, a lamentation and is in a peaceful position. When the smaller soul thinks himself quantitatively as big as the larger soul, he is under the spell of Maya, for that is not his constitutional position. No one can become the greater soul simply by mental speculation. The smallness or greatness of different souls is described in the Baraho Purana as Shabhamsha Namsha. The Shabhamsha soul is the supreme personality of Godhead, and the Vivinamsa souls or small particles are eternally small particles, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mama hamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha. The small living entities are eternally part and parcel, and therefore it is not possible for them to be quantitatively as great as the super soul. Hare Krishna, please forgive my mistakes.
Thank you so much, Mataji. So here we see how
Is this also blood?
here we see how the living entity is given different bodies according to material nature. And it's really interesting. In the very first sentence of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, it is to be understood that the body is designated. When we look at designated, it's almost as if the body that we have received is specifically chosen and given to us. And it's done so based on our situations, based on our karma, based on our desires, and so many different things. And the interesting thing is, or as we go through the purport, what Srila Prabhupada brings out is that as the living entity, we get a body based on our karma, our desires, our past actions, and so on and so forth. But we can only occupy one body. Whereas the Supersoul, the Supersoul can occupy the universal body. It can occupy every body at the same time. So this shows how the jiva is so minute, how the jiva, the living entity, is so small in comparison to the Supersoul. But we understand that qualitatively we are the same, but quantitatively we are different. Quantitatively we are much smaller. And in this whole purport, Srila Prabhupada very much emphasizes this point, and we come to this verse here, the Mamevamsho Jiva Loka, Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha, Manashashtan Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karishati. It's a verse from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about how the living entity is his parts and parcels, how we are all Amsha, right here it says, where is it? Swamsha is the supreme, and then Vibhin Amsha. Amsha is a part and parcel, and then Vibhin is a small part and parcel of the Swamsha. We're all small parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, but Mana Shashtanindriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. We are all struggling, right? We're all struggling with the six senses, meaning the five senses we have and the mind, because of our conditioned nature, because we are so small in quantity compared to the Supreme Lord. We have the capacity to be overcome by the material influences. And so we can never actually be as great as Krishna because we can fall under the influence of Maya, and Maya is just one of Krishna's energies. But what is so beautiful is that even though we are so small, we are so insignificant in many, many ways, Krishna is the Supersoul, as Paramatma. He goes with us everywhere we go. In every body we take, Krishna decides to take a body or enter the same body with us. It's described in the Puranas that it's like two birds sitting on a tree. One bird is the jiva, who's pecking away at different fruits. Sometimes it's sour, sometimes it's bitter, sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's juicy, sometimes it's so tasty that we do a little bit of a dance. And then there's the other bird who's just always watching over us. He's always keeping his eye on us. He's always guiding us. He's giving us a nudge, a little pat on the back and telling us, no, don't go for that fruit. Go for this fruit over here. But during that whole time, what he's also doing, he's waiting. He's waiting for us to actually turn to him and pay attention to him and give him our full attention so that he can guide us to a tree where the fruits are always nourishing, joyful, and blissful. But he never forces us. He lets us know. He reminds us every now and then. He sends something our way just to shock our system and remind us that, hang on, this isn't life. Life is about connecting. Life is about something more than what we're living. And in that way, Krishna becomes our best friend. He's always our best friend, but which best friend goes with you everywhere, anytime, any place? Only Krishna. Text 44. Tasmadimam swam prakritim devim sad atmikam durvibhavyam parabhavya Svarupena Vatishtate. And we'd like to read the translation in purple.
Shall I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, go ahead.
Thus, a yogi can be in the self-realized position after conquering the unsurmountable spell of Maya, who present himself as both the cause and effect of this material manifestation and is therefore very difficult to understand. Purport. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that the spell of Maya, which covers the knowledge of the living entity, is insurmountable. However, one who surrenders unto Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can conquer this seemingly surmountable spell of Maya. Here also is stated that the Daivi Pakruti, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord, is Dura Vaibhavya, very difficult to understand and very difficult to conquer. One must, however, conquer this unsurmountable spell of Maya, and this is possible by the grace of the Lord. When Lord reveals himself to the surrendered soul, it is also stated here, Swarupena Vaisthitet. Swarup means that one has to know that he is not the Supreme Soul, but rather part and parcel of the Supreme Soul. That is self-realization. To think falsely that is one is the Supreme Soul and that one is all-pervading is not Swarupa. This is not realization of his actual position. The real position is that one is part and parcel. It is recommended here that one remain in that position of actual self-realization. In Bhagavad Gita, this understanding is defined as a Brahman realization. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the activity of Brahman. As long as one is not self-realized, he engages in activity based on the false identification with the body. When one is situated in his real self, then he then the activities of Brahman realization began. The Mayavadi philosopher says that after Brahman realization, all activities stop, but that is not actually so. If the soul is so active in his abnormal condition existing under the covering of matter, how can one deny his activity when free? An example may be cited here. If a man in the disease condition is very active, how can one imagine that when he is free from the disease, he will be inactive? Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is the indication of Bhagavad Gita 18.54. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktinam Labhate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. For those who engage in devotional service, there is no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as a part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Hare Krishna.
Thanks so much, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
So we see in the Bhagavad Gita again a very famous verse. Devi Hesha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratyaya Mamevaya Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. It's a verse that describes the divine energy of the Supreme Lord that consists of the three modes of material nature and how it's very, very difficult to overcome. But one who takes shelter, one who surrenders unto Krishna, Krishna says that crossing that difficult ocean becomes very, very easy. In various places in the Bhagavatam, in the purports from Srila Prabhupada, we hear how the material world is described like an ocean of misery. And it's very difficult to swim across the ocean, right? I don't know if anybody's ever tried swimming across the ocean. In my childhood days, I had a very close friend. who was a professional swimmer. And he, at a very young age, had actually managed to swim across the channel, right? The British Channel or the English Channel. But it took many attempts for him to even come to a stage of being willing and courageous enough to do so. Imagine swimming across the ocean. Very difficult, very hard. And imagine swimming across the ocean of material suffering. So much more difficult. But Prabhupada says many a times, and even in Bhagavatam verses, it says how one who surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna, Krishna not only sends a boat to cross that ocean, but he also makes that ocean become as small as a calf's hoof print. Just a small puddle of water. And naturally, if it's a small, tiny puddle of water the size of a calf's hoof print, even a child can just step over. And that's the glories of surrendering onto Krishna. But here, what we see is in the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada very much emphasizes this point, or talks about this point, that the very first thing that one has to do is recognize or come to this point of Brahman realization. That's the first step. The first step is to recognize that we're all living a life under illusion. We're all living a life under the influence of the three modes around us. And this manifests and looks different in different cultures, in different communities, in different societies, and people with different backgrounds. For some, it could be a very gross manifestation of illusion. You know, the cultures where breaking the four eggs is a very common thing, a very mode of ignorance, gross manifestation. But in others, it may be a subtle manifestation, something in the mind, something in the intelligence, whereby one feels or thinks themselves to be a controller, a proprietor, or something like that. The three modes are always implicating and affecting us in different ways. And when we come to this realization that actually there's more to life than just the way we're living, there's more to life than just glorified activities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. There's more to life than the rat race. When one comes to this point that actually we're a spirit soul and not this body, then one comes to this stage of Brahman realization. Right? That's when one can actually start to experience and recognize that they're not meant to be just influenced by the three modes. They're meant to transcend or go beyond the three modes. And here, what happens after one realizes that, or after one comes to this point of Brahman realization and realizes that they are not this body but a spirit soul, then one engages in the activities of Brahman. And it's interesting because here, Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice example of a diseased person, right? So sometimes one can think that, Brahman realization means, okay, now we're doing nothing. Now everything is void, null and void. There's no pain, there's no difficulty. Everything is just peace, calm, nothingness. But Srila Prabhupada gives a very, I'm going to use the word very loosely, but a very cool example here, because we all have experience of sickness. We all have experience of being diseased. We all have experience of not being well, whether it's physically or mentally or some other way. And in that state, we may well go ahead and perform different activities. You know, some of us may be responsible for family, so we may well, while we're suffering from a cold or a flu or some other sort of illness, we may still go ahead and wake up in the morning and, you know, prepare the breakfast and get the kids ready for school and all these different things. But it doesn't feel enjoyable. It doesn't feel calming or soothing because we feel diseased. We feel like, oh my gosh, I just want to sleep more. I just want to, like, I wish I was just better. So all those activities are actually painful and difficult. But when we recover from the illness and then we perform the same activities, the same those same activities can now give joy, can give peace, can feel pleasing. And Prabhupada uses that analogy, that example, to help us see that actually in our current state, we're very much diseased. We're living a life because we're living a diseased life because we are absorbed and engaged in the three modes of material nature. Under the influence, we're acting. Under the influence of our conditionings, under the influence of our previous karmic activities or current karmic activities, we're going about our life not recognizing that we're diseased, because we try and try and try to find some sort of happiness, some sort of peace, some sort of joy. But life just happens and something hits us. Suffering, pain, difficulties. But when one heals, one doesn't then just become, okay, we do nothing now. We don't just do nothing. But one comes to this point of spiritual activity and spiritualizing all of our activities, connecting everything we're doing, every person we're meeting, every conversation we're having, in some way, shape, or form, connecting it to Krishna consciousness, connecting it to Krishna. Then we're actually starting to experience activities in a healthy state. Because that's where we start to realize Jiva Resvarapoy Krishna Nityadas, that actually the inherent nature, the actual activities of the jiva, of the living entities, is to serve and be a servant of Krishna. And that's the healthy state of activities, as is mentioned here. For with those who engage in devotional service, there is no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. That is the ultimate perfection of life. So the ultimate perfection of life is not just to be spiritual, but it's to engage ourselves in a healthy state of activities, which is engaging in devotional service to the Lord. And so what Srila Prabhupada has created for us in the ISKCON movement, when you go through, this is really random, but when you go through the seven, what they're called now, but the seven principles of ISKCON, there's a specific term for it, I forgot what it's called now. But the rules that Srila Prabhupada set out for why ISKCON exists as a society, then we see that Srila Prabhupada tried to create a home with rooms to accommodate everyone. Because his whole point was that everybody, every man, every woman from any culture, from any background, regardless of one's previous life, whether that is previous life meaning previous physical life or previous life meaning one's engagements before coming to spiritual life, regardless of any of that, Srila Prabhupada saw that actually everybody is looking for love and to be loved. And everybody is really and truly looking for Krishna. And if Srila Prabhupada's mission, or as part of Srila Prabhupada's mission, if he can create a world where there is a home for everyone to connect to Krishna, then that's the place he wants to create. That's the home, that's the building, that's the movement he wants to create. And so we see that in every part of the world, Srila Prabhupada's movement exists, and it exists in different cultures, different communities with slight variations, but the fundamental principle that everybody engages in association, everybody engages in studying Srila Prabhupada's books, everyone engages in chanting the holy names, everyone engages in attending festivals and programs at the temple, everybody, or at home, depending on, sort of climate in those countries. Everybody engages in spreading the mission, because at the heart, that is what connects every follower of Srila Prabhupada, is connecting to his life and mission, which is to glorify Krishna and to connect everybody else in such a way that they will feel the love of Krishna coming through each of the devotees and his followers. So I'll end by quoting the very last line, which is, thus ends the Bhagavatam purports of the third canto, 28th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Any questions, comments, corrections, reflections? No? In that case, we can end
Hare
there.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Jankari Mataji.
Hare Krishna. I'm just wondering how much devotional service would qualify you to say you are doing devotional service. How much you need to do, because it's quite loosely used, isn't it? Devotional service. I know you have to be sincere and pour your heart in it and all that, but how much? I mean, it depends on your circumstances. Do you have to go to the temple? Do you have to promote so many hours and so on? I mean, it sounds a silly question, but it can be a bit confusing.
I don't know if you've heard Guru Maharaj's classes from 2015. I'll send you one, the one that I've been listening to recently. And it's really interesting because Guru Maharaj is very fixed, as you know, in his own devotional service. And what he sees, what he says is that devotional service is so powerful that even if you can offer a tiny little bit of devotional service, that will carry us to Goloka Vrindavan. Oftentimes we think, I put my hand up also, oftentimes we think that we'll attain Krishna Prema by our endeavors. Oftentimes we think that our efforts, our so-called sincerity, our so-called discipline, our so-called dedication will carry us. It's what we stand on to get to Krishna. But if we hold a mirror in front of our face, in front of our heart, then we know how insincere we are, especially when we read through the bhajans or hear the bhajans of the acharyas. Where is their devotion and where is ours? Not even comparable. And so Maharaj also then focuses on this idea of mercy, that actually for one who isn't able to tap into and understand, even appreciate rather, not even understand, but appreciate the mercy that Mahaprabhu has come to shower us with, then no matter how much devotional service we do, we're not going anywhere. Because it's only by the mercy of Guru, of Mahaprabhu, of Krishna, of Srila Prabhupada, of the devotees, can we actually attain Krishna Prema. Absorption service is given to us. It's not something that we actually, get because we've endeavored for it. It's actually given to us. It's passed to us. The only thing we can do is just open our arms, our hands out and go, just fill it up with as much as you can. And so I guess if I be a bit more practical with your question, you're right. Devotional service is not dependent on coming to the temple. It's not dependent on 24/7, 365, being ready to do something for the temple, for, a project or a program or something. Devotional service at its core is there to bring us to a point of Kirtanyasa Dahari, this point of bringing us to always chant and glorify Krishna. And glorifying Krishna, sometimes we use words, but most of the time it's our character, the way we carry ourselves in the world, and how we connect and spread that love. We see Srila Prabhupada so many times, so many stories, so many pastimes we hear where he's speaking in quotes, mundane things. He's not talking about Krishna this, Krishna that, Mahaprabhu this, Mahaprabhu that. He's speaking down to earth, having conversations with the people on the ground. But so much love is coming and pouring out of his heart that they just feel connected to Krishna through Srila Prabhupada. And so devotional service, I think if we change the framework of what devotional service means, devotional service isn't just about engaging in a project or engaging in supporting the mission of ISKCON. Devotional service is also becoming pure ourselves. It's also developing our own taste for hearing and chanting Krishna's names and pastimes. And it's falling in love with Krishna ourselves. And so from that perspective, we should always be doing devotional service because that's where the mercy comes. But if our perspective, our perception of devotional service is being out on the streets 24/7, it's being in the temple 24/7, then yeah, we can engage our body in those activities, but are we purifying and coming to a character of Vaishnavism that connects us to Krishna?
Yeah, that I agree. I think that question is on my mind too. But I'm just thinking about you can be doing the right things, all the lectures you attend, all the books you read, it's pointing to same sort of the highest area of devotional service. And say if you do it, you are striving for that. You can end up in a very lonely place because people challenge you a lot. If you see what I mean. And you think, shall I or shan't I? I mean, it can be difficult because I have poured myself too much in the temple, and I'm feeling now that I'm withdrawing a little, and whether it's a good place to be, I'm not sure. But as you say, if you continue with that sincerity and the open heart and wanting to do it and please Krishna, it doesn't matter where you are, I suppose.
I think in our stage, association is key also. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that everybody's moved towards the temples. Sometimes people have different experiences with the temples and so on. Is everybody has a different experience and takes some sort of different energy away. But we always need some sort of association because association carries us in our worst days. Those days where we're not feeling so spiritually inclined, then association carries us. And association can uplift us and take us to greater heights because the devotees we spend time with, even 5-10 minutes a day or something like that, that can really transform and transport our consciousness in a way that we're developing qualities or see life in a different perspective. And so association is always key. Now, how we engage in that association, or whether that's in a temple setting or a home setting in terms of sanghas or a virtual setting, I think everybody's going to be individual and everybody's allowed to be individual. But at the same time, what I'd say and suggest is don't underestimate the physical association that one can get, because there's always a different energy.
Yeah, I
Online,
know what you
there's,
mean. Yeah, that's
something.
really nice.
So I know that was a roundabout way of
Thank you.
answering the question, but